Welcome to this live edition of Seahawks Forever. We have big news. The NFL schedule finally being revealed live at the top of the hour at 5 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern time. For the first time, we're going to get to see the Seahawks schedule. Nobody knows anything up until this point. It's all a mystery. It'll be revealed in just a few moments. We'll all get to react to it live for the first time. Yeah, that's not what's happening tonight at all. The leaks have just turned into a flood. And what used to be tip of the iceberg, by the time we'd get to this point, at least the reveal would fill in the rest of the blanks. All the blanks have been filled in. We know what the Seattle Seahawks schedule is going to look like for the 2025 season, but we still get to react to it even though we don't get the big reveal. So coming up next on the show, I will give you what I think are the good things about the schedule, things I like about the schedule, some of the things I don't like about the schedule, and I'll just ruin it for you. Spoiler alert, I like it all. The Seahawks got some favors cashed in, I think, this year with the schedule makers. We'll talk about it, break it all down, coming up next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Is to just like, follow, subscribe the show, hit that bell button for notification of all future content whenever it's posted. But if you'd like to donate in some of the more tangible ways, those are all listed down below in the description and linked to make it easy for you as well. So here we are. It is schedule release night. And originally I had intended to go live at 7:45. Here we are, 7:45 Eastern time anyway, so that we could talk about some of the leaks throughout the day, the things we knew. We kind of knew the first four early in the day, and then some things filled themselves in. And then we would get into the actual release from the Seahawks, show it on the screen, go over it together. Well, for about the last hour or maybe 2 hours, we've kind of known. And there's always a curveball or two. So the schedule that we show you once the Seahawks put it out at 5 o'clock with the rest of the league may be slightly different than the things that we've seen throughout the day. But I think the reporting has come from good sources, and it's all been sort of corroborated by each other, that I think we have a pretty good idea of how the schedule is going to look. But let's do this just for the sake of making it at least as interesting as possible. I'll just stick with my intended flow, and we'll talk about the first four that we've known throughout the day first, and then we'll get into some of your comments and questions here right off the bat. And then when the Seahawks release their graphic at 5 o'clock, then we'll go over it in its entirety. Pete Carroll used to always talk about, he's not the only one, but he was the one that was most, in my view and all of ours, he would talk about the season in 4 quarters. Not as easy now because they added that 17th game. But I do like to break it down that way. And some of the things I look for whenever a new schedule comes out is what does the start look like? And we'll get into why that's important, particularly this year for this team. When are the primetime games? That's always of interest. When's the bye, right? And then is there a murderer's row? Is there that section of the schedule that just looks really daunting? Last year, actually the last 2 seasons, the finish has been really, really tough. And in a way that you could see it when the schedule comes out. Because a lot of times, I think this year's schedule points this out as much as any that I can remember in recent memory, that there are a lot of teams we just don't know what they're going to look like and who they're going to be. And that makes it difficult, obviously, to predict records. But by the way, that's still a fun exercise. I didn't do it last year because everything was so new. I am going to do it this year, tomorrow. So today we're just going to talk about the schedule and some of the logistics and some of these points that I'm getting into now. And then tomorrow I will go game by game and do a schedule prediction for you this year. But there are your legacy teams where it's a little easier to know even now, even after an off season where a good portion of the roster changes where we have an idea who they're going to be. Do we even know who the Seahawks are going to be? I mean, that's something that we've talked about ad nauseum for the last 4 months, and we'll continue to talk about over the next 4 months until we get to training camp. But I think we have a better idea this year, certainly than we did last year, about the identity, what they're looking for. On the defensive side of the ball, there's all sorts of certainty. It's the changes on the offense that we're not sure of. But if you know me and you watch me, you know that I will take an optimistic viewpoint and an optimistic slant. That's easier to do this year for a couple of reasons. First, let's go over these. We already knew the opponents. We do every year and have for quite some time in the way that the NFL does their schedules. So there's obviously the 2 games apiece against the other 3 division opponents. That accounts for 6 games. And then there are the 2 rotating divisions, which is set in a predetermined schedule. Has nothing to do with how you finished the year before. This year, it's the AFC South and the NFC South. And so when you get into talking about schedule strength and how one team might have an advantage over another, within the division, for the most part, it's pretty similar, right? Everybody in the NFC West plays the AFC South and the NFC South. And so with all of that, that gives you 14 games that you know who the opponents are going to be in advance, years in advance, really. And then the other 3 games are based on where you finish within the division, and those are set in stone. And so, for example, you have probably seen some of the strength of schedule rankings in advance of even the schedule leaks coming out. And the Seahawks have, or are tied for, the 21st toughest schedule in the league. Or if you prefer to look at it this way, if it's an easier way for you to wrap your head around it, the 11th easiest schedule. Whereas the San Francisco 49ers have the easiest schedule in the league. And that's because they finished last in the division. The Seahawks finished second. So those other 3, call them at-large games, are against 3 other last-place finishers, whereas the Seahawks play 3 other second-place finishers. That is what accounts for that difference in the strength of schedule. And the difference being the Seahawks then end up getting the Steelers, Commanders, and Vikings as their 3 at-large games, whereas the 49ers get the Bears, Browns, Giants. Otherwise, everything else is the same. But how difficult or easy a schedule is can often be in the minutia, right? In when's the bye week? When are your Thursday games? How often do you get, remember last year, the Seahawks got hit as hard as any team in the league with playing teams while they were coming off a stressful situation and their opponent was not. I'm just top of my head here. I didn't dig into this and find this number again, but I want to say it was like 9 times last year. So the majority of their games where the Seahawks were coming off little rest and their opponents were either coming off a bye, a mini bye, or a less of a travel game. And I'll just, again, spoiler alert, like I just don't see that being as big of a problem this year. Another thing we always look for here being on the West Coast is how many of those 10 a.m. starts are we going to get? And some of those we don't know at the beginning because some of them are flexed and could end up, even though you're in the East Coast time zone, sometimes you'll play a 1:00 game. It's not as common. At first glance this year, and we'll confirm that certainly when the schedule comes out in 5 minutes, it looks like the Seahawks have 5 of those 10 a.m. games. They would have had 6, but we know that the Washington Commanders game is not going to be a 10 a.m. game. We know that this is one of those rotating years now where the Seahawks have more away games than they do home. So 8 home, 9 away. But there are a couple of other things that we knew earlier in the day that were confirmed, kind of connecting the dots as the league started to not just leak, but announce certain matchups. And in particular, they were announcing the holiday games and the international games. Seahawks aren't involved in any of those. They'll get 4 primetime games this year, 2 Thursday night games, a Monday and a Sunday. And that's, of course, subject to change because as we get deeper into the season, it could get flexed into a Sunday game later in the year. And gosh, this year there's even the possibility of some Monday night games being flexed as well, right? But at least to start off with 4 primetime games, but no international games at all. And no Thanksgiving or Christmas Day games. So the only kind of quick turnarounds you have to worry about are those Thursday games, and we'll see how those look when everything comes out. Let's do this before the official schedule comes out, because this was known early in the day. The first 4, the first quarter of the season. Looks like the Seahawks are going to start the season at home, Lumen Field, against the San Francisco 49ers. And this is unusual for a couple of reasons. It's not unusual to open at home. The Seahawks are on a pretty good run of that. This will be the 4th straight season now, opening at home. They've won 2 of the last 3, both of those against the Denver Broncos. And then, of course, 2 years ago, they lost to the Rams in week 1. In their last 10 opening games, they're 6-4. But a divisional opener is not common. They got the Rams in 2023, of course, just 2 years ago, but you have to go all the way back before that to 2015. The last time they opened the season against a divisional foe, that was the Rams also, albeit the St. Louis Rams. And then week 2, of course, this one's going to be really interesting. A little bit surprised that this one maybe wasn't a Monday or a Sunday game. But at Pittsburgh, people are going to call it the DK Metcalf revenge game. I hate that term. DK holds no ill will towards the Seahawks. But there is always that little added motivation. Of course, I get that. Lots of unknowns, though. We're assuming Aaron Rodgers is going to be the quarterback there when that happens. If not, Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, potentially. But that'll be interesting at Pittsburgh against DK Metcalf and potentially Aaron Rodgers. And then week 3 versus New Orleans at home. Of course, that'll be a little bit of a, well, y'all are going to call it revenge game again with Clint Kubiak. But certainly that'll be one of the storylines facing the team that he called plays for last year. I think the bigger storyline here will be it's in just his 3rd week as an NFL head coach, it'll be a homecoming for Kellen Moore. I find that really interesting. The former Prosser Mustang and Boise State Bronco quarterback, Kellen Moore, who grew up in Eastern Washington, coming home to play, to coach against his quote-unquote hometown team, the Seattle Seahawks. And then week 4, their first primetime game at Arizona, Thursday Night Football. What I don't like about that is it's too early in the season to go to Arizona. Like I've made that trip a number of times, made it last year. And I think last year it was first weekend in December, which is the perfect time for a road game in Arizona because it was 78 degrees and beautiful and sunny and all of that when things are starting to get a little dark and dreary in the Pacific Northwest. All right. So we are officially at 5:00 Pacific time. And so what I'm waiting for here it is. I just wanted to get the, boy, they are right on top of it. The official graphic from the Seahawks so that I can post on the screen and we have some visual aids to follow along. All right, let's do this. A couple logistical things here. There it is. And I can leave all the graphics up because it looks like you can see everything pretty well. First of all, just a quick scan, make sure we didn't miss anything, that anything is incorrect. Check the accuracy of the leaked schedule, which I have here. So we'll just walk through it. Of course, went over the first 4, of course, at home against the Niners, at the Steelers. That is confirmed, a 10 a.m. game there. New Orleans at home week 3, and then Thursday Night Football at Arizona. Then we get into the second quarter of the season. Week 5 at Tampa Bay. or Tampa Bay at home week 6. That's my birthday, by the way, October 12th. That'll be a fun time to go to Jacksonville, Florida for the first time to play the Jaguars. And then they come back home to play the Houston Texans on Monday Night Football on the 20th before a week 8 bye. And then just moving forward, looks like the leaked schedule 2 hours ago was really accurate because they come out of the bye Sunday Night Football at Washington, Jaden Daniels and the Commanders and Dan Quinn. Of course, that'll be a big storyline there, coaching against his former team. And then back home against the Arizona Cardinals, at the LA Rams on November 16th in week 11, at Tennessee. So that's your first time with back-to-back road games this season. Only 2 instances of that. And then back home to play the Vikings in week 13, at Atlanta, week 14, back home for the final 2 home games of the regular season against the Indianapolis Colts, and then another Thursday night game against the Rams. And then start times to be determined, as they always are the last 2 weeks, but at Carolina, at San Francisco. So those leaks were 100% accurate. Let me tell you some of the things I like, and then we'll just open it up for discussion and we'll get into this, okay? First of all, we talked about those first 4. And the thing I like for a Seahawks team that themselves is going to be in transition on offense. And so I was hoping for, fingers crossed, a little bit of a soft landing when it comes to the start of the schedule for that offense to kind of get in sync. 3 of the first 4 games I would call against teams in transition. And you could make a case that all 4 of them are really. The 49ers, tons of changes on defense. Robert Saleh back in as defensive coordinator, but a wildly revamped front 7 in the draft. Going to be a lot of young guys up there. It's going to be Nick Bosa and a bunch of young dudes playing their first NFL game. Mykel Williams, Alfred Collins, CJ West, right? Lots of talent, but first time out of the gate. Of course, they're also going to be facing then an offensive line that's going to be new for the Seahawks, at least one new starter in Gray Zabel. But, we don't know what that 5 is going to look like. And so that will be, to me, that'll be the storyline of the game heading into that one. The Seahawks rebuilt, newly coached up and schemed offensive line against a completely rebuilt San Francisco defensive front outside of Nick Bosa, right? Pittsburgh, tons of changes on offense. They'll have some new players on their offensive line as well. They'll have Troy Fatanu coming back off of injury. Aaron Rodgers settling in, just his second week, presumably, of course. And then the DK Metcalf storyline. New Orleans, of course, going to be a really new team. Lots of changes on that roster. And it's going to be young quarterback. We're going to see this. This is a consistent storyline throughout this schedule. Young, if not rookie quarterbacks. Is it going to be Tyler Shuck, second-round pick this year out of Louisville, getting the start? He would be the leader in the clubhouse, I would say, with the retirement of Derek Carr. Or is Spencer Rattler in his second year going to seize the reins? Jake Hayner would be the other one there in the competition. Then even in Arizona, I would make the argument they are a team in transition. Of course, Kyler Murray, a lot more certainty on offense for them. But on defense, they needed a massive infusion in talent, and they got it. They went out and spent a bunch of money, signed a bunch of guys in free agency, and loaded up on defense in the draft. So there's going to be a lot of new moving parts there as well, just 4 weeks into the season. It's a balanced start. I mean, you see all the way through week 10. This is really unusual, alternating home and away. We have seen times over the last few years where it's one or the other. Last year, the first 2/3 of the season very heavily weighted towards home games. Didn't really help the Seahawks as they didn't play well at home. That'll be a big storyline this year. Just 3 wins at home, but they went 7-1 on the road to get to their 10 wins. But an alternating home and away schedule. And then even when you get to week 11 and 12, the 2 road games, the first one is in LA, right? So not as stressful there. And then you get the quote unquote mini bye coming off of that game before you have to head to the East Coast and play Carolina in a game that could very well be, I'm sorry, Tennessee, that will be a 10 a.m. game. So you get the mini bye before the East Coast 10 a.m. road game. I find that favorable. The week 8 bye is about as good as it can get. 8, 9, 10. That's where you want your bye week, right? You want to split the season as much as you can in half. And in fact, I think it was week 8 last year, wasn't it? That was when the Ernest Jones trade happened, or shortly before it, played the Rams going into the bye. So that's what I like about the first 4. Plus, even that 4th game, if you want to make the argument that like, oh, I don't know, the Cardinals look pretty tough this year. Seahawks history down in Arizona in the recent past been pretty darn good, right? 7 straight against that team overall. Haven't lost to the Cardinals since 2021. They've won 4 straight overall and 7 of the last 8 in Arizona. So I like that. And then when you look at that, the next quote unquote quarter of the season, kind of those 3 games going into the bye, certainly. But even if you want to take the next 4, you come back home and you get the two of the next 3 games are against very, very talented teams. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, with a lot of continuity there, really. That's a team I don't think enough people are talking about because they didn't really undergo a lot of changes other than play caller with Liam Cohen moving on to take the head coaching job in Jacksonville. But of that stretch, the 2 of those 3 games there against the Bucs, Jaguars, Texans, you get the 2 better teams at home. Now, I'm saying that assuming there's going to be a learning curve for the Jaguars under Liam Cohen, but certainly they have a bunch of talent down there. But it's also on my birthday, so we can't lose that game. But we get the 2 most talented teams at home. We'll see if year 2 under Mike McDonald, playing better defense out of the gate, might fire up the crowd more. The crowd might be a little bit more of a factor. Some of these new ticketing rules that we talked about with Bryce Coots the other day on the show. See if those have some sort of impact or effect. So I really like the balance leading into the bye. No back-to-back East Coast road trips. Home and away, home and away, home and away. And then even going to Washington to play what could be a very good Washington Commanders team. Now, pump the brakes on that a little bit because even though they had that great season last year and really pushed in the playoffs, really pushed to get even further, and the great season for Jaden Daniels, future looks bright there. But they had a tremendous amount of roster turnover on that roster. They had a bunch of guys on 1-year deals and expiring contracts last year. So we'll see. We'll see what the Washington Commanders look like when we get to that Sunday night football game, week 8. And then the second half of the schedule, again, you get the Arizona Cardinals at home. Then you travel to the Rams on the 11th or week 11. And that is not a primetime game. That's a regular Saturday game. So at LA, like I said, and then to Tennessee the week after. Again, another young quarterback. It's going to be Cam Ward, most likely, if he's healthy then. Then you come home against a Minnesota team that we really don't know what that's going to look like. They completely revamped that interior offensive line. J.J. McCarthy, we would assume, would be the guy, provided he's healthy. How good is he going to be in his first season as a rookie? Then travel to Atlanta the week after to play another young quarterback, Michael Penix. Big storyline there. Before coming home for those last 2 home games against an Indianapolis team that, again, could be Daniel Jones, could be Anthony Richardson, could be Riley Leonard, I suppose. And then you get the Thursday night game against the Rams, but you get that while coming off another home game. And so, best case scenario, really, to try to minimize the impact of travel heading into a Thursday game. Now, haven't looked at the rest of the schedule league-wide. Obviously, maybe that's becoming a trend. Maybe that's something the league is trying to do. But they can't do that for everybody if you're going to insist on having all these Thursday night games. And then your last 2 road games at Carolina to play Dave Canales, right? Former Seahawk assistant. I mean, all sorts of storylines on this schedule, just the way that the divisions work out before finishing at San Francisco. So I find that fascinating as well, that you bookend the season. You open against the Niners, you finish against the Niners. In years past, there's been something about the schedule makers that we haven't seen the 49ers as a rule until later in the season. Often, over the last several seasons, we'll play both of our games against San Fran in the second half of the season, whereas we've typically played the Rams earlier. This year, that's flip-flop. We don't get the Rams until week 11, then we turn back around and play them again in week 16. So a lot going on there. And then that last week 18, the Rams also play Arizona at the same time. And so in a division that I think could really be up for grabs, man, so much could come down to that last week in week 18. So just to kind of wrap up, some of the things that I like about this schedule, it's balanced. A lot of home and away alternating. I like the start. I think I don't want to call it an easy start because we just never know what these teams are going to look like. I think it's a favorable start. About as favorable as you could get. 2 of the first 3 of the first 5 of the first 7 at home. Playing a lot of young quarterbacks early on, a lot of teams they're going through as many changes as we are. There's no murderer's row in this schedule. Not that I see. Not like there have been in years past where it's kind of piled up at the end of the year where you look ahead and you're like, what was that? 2 years ago where we played like Philadelphia, Kansas City, the Niners twice in 3 weeks. That's happened far too often the last couple of years. The division games, I think, are spaced out nicely. And we don't get the Rams until the second half of the season. Heading into the season, I think the storyline in the NFC West is the Rams are far and away the favorite. I agree with that. And then the other 3 are all battling for who's going to battle the Rams, right? Battling for who's going to be that other team to challenge the Rams, if at all. I think it's going to be a really, really competitive division. And I think the way that they've spaced the schedule out is a good thing. The Seahawks, as always, will travel more than most teams in the NFL, the 3rd most miles traveled this year. But the fact that there's no international games and no holiday games, I think it's a pretty favorable schedule as far as travel goes and what it could have been. And honestly, in the second year with Mike McDonald and some of the changes on offense and all the young players we showed you the other day, talking with Bryce about the depth chart and the current state of the roster, all the rookie contracts, over 40 of them currently on this roster, that as much as there's things that need to be taken care of on that Seahawks roster, there's that offense is going to need time to come together. I think this schedule gives them an opportunity to do that without getting hammered over the head in any 4 or 5 week stretch, as we've seen in the past. Let's see what you guys think. Cheers from the sassy salsa dancer in Duval, Washington from Dogzilla Monster. I have no idea what that means. Are you a salsa dancer? Is that how that's going? X-Wing says, hey. Alex says, hey. Cole says, let's go. Okay. I am recently engaged. Apparently, X-Wing says he's recently learned you can only use the term fiance. He's missing an E there if they're from southern France. Otherwise, you have to call them a sparkling girlfriend. I think I'm going to stick with fiance. Now, Seth doesn't like that our first and last games are against the Niners. I don't know. Again, I would rather catch the Niners right off the bat with that defense, with that first game with all those new faces on defense, then maybe a little bit later on. Now, yeah, they'll be healthier, but so will we, presumably, right? I've used that word a lot already tonight, right? But that's kind of just par for the course when you look ahead at the schedule. I'd much prefer it to, twice in 3 weeks like last year. That was stupid. I didn't like that at all. Will the Hawks win more games at home this year? I would bet everything I have, which isn't much, on yes. I just think, I think a big part of that early last year, I've said this for years, that I think the biggest thing you can do to get the crowd into it at home again is play really good defense consistently. That over the last 4 or 5 years, just seeing so many teams put long drives together, especially at the beginning of games. So many 3rd and longs converted, so many 4th downs converted. It just takes the wind out of your sails. And so if you're trying to do that thing that was so prevalent back in 2005 and then 2013, 14, 15, where the crowd understands if teams huddle, you start screaming then to make an impact. And then you scream as the quarterback is at the line of scrimmage, barking out his cadence to try to impact the game, give your defense just that half step, little quicker get off. That if you don't play consistently good defense, if you're not impacting the other team's quarterback, if you're giving up long drives and conversions, you just, as the game wears on, the crowd starts to dial it down. And early last season, what was happening? Teams, especially that Buffalo game, like they were just running roughshod all over us. That makes it really, really hard to keep screaming your guts out when it's not having an impact on the game. So I think starting off all 11 starters, well, if you don't count DeMarcus Lawrence, he's going to be a rotational guy. All 11 starters, 14 players that started games for the Seahawks last year coming back. And we saw the way they finished last season, plus some of the additions that we're excited about on that side of the ball as well, that I think they get off to a better start and give the crowd a chance to be a part of it. I think it also gives the offense time to gel. And that learning curve of new scheme, couple new players, new quarterback, etc. Yeah, that's what I like. Date of the home opener says right there, September 7th. Okay, Seth, how do the Niners always have an easy schedule? They have the easiest schedule. I don't think they always have the easiest schedule because they've been finishing first in the division many times over the last few years. And so those 3 at-large games, they're playing other first-place teams. The reason they have the easiest schedule this year, and maybe you submitted this before I started talking about it, it's simply because they finished 4th this year. And so they get those 3 games. It's Browns, Bears. What did I say? They go Browns, Bears, Giants, as opposed to Steelers, Commanders, Vikings for the Seahawks, because those teams also finished second. And then the 2 rotational divisions are 2 weak divisions. And so all of the NFC West teams are ranked in the top 3rd of the league as far as easiest schedules go because they have all of that in common. Hey, there's Bryce. What's up, dude? Solarius says, I think the most important info from the schedule is when the bye week is. I agree. Let me see here. Yeah. Seth says we got to show up hard for that opener. That's I'm glad you brought that up because that was another thing I had in my notes and I didn't mention it that I like about that being the first game. And I've seen a lot of buzz today as some of these leaks came out from analysts, content creators, reporters that they really don't like divisional games to start the season. I disagree. I say ratchet up the intensity right off the bat. And if there was ever a test for Seahawk fans to come out, and hopefully they're excited about this team, and I think they will be with all the changes in the offseason and with Mike McDonald and you know the arrow pointing up and the way they played defense near the end of last season, that I do think that's going to be a crazy atmosphere at Lumen Field. And hopefully it gives us the whole offseason. Now that the schedule's out, season ticket holders who have paid for their tickets can start to actually do things with their ticket. They could post them if they wanted to. As soon as you have your invoice paid off and the schedule is out, you can go to NFL Ticket Exchange, start selling tickets. So hopefully knowing it's a San Francisco game, those kind of fence-sitting casual fans, should I go? I don't know. It's only the Titans or whatever, that they'll use their tickets. Now, by the same token, those people that own tickets, people or companies that never go to the games and use them only as an investment to resell, they probably look at the schedule and think, well, that is an attractive ticket right there. I might be able to double my money. But remember that the new policy with the Seahawks is if they identify accounts that are strictly used for reselling, they'll give them a chance to explain themselves, but they'll very likely take their tickets away. However, this being the first game of the season, you know, if there are those accounts out there that are like, oh shit, I better lock it down this year. But it's only, they said, if you sell the majority of your tickets, you'll be under review. Well, I can certainly sell week 1. There is obviously going to be a fair share of 49er fans in the seats for that game. But hopefully all the excitement in the offseason leading up to it will really, really set the tone and get the crowd out there and get them going crazy. So in that respect, I really like that it's a division game. Let's just ramp up the intensity right off the bat. I would have been more worried if it was a team like, who are other home games? If New Orleans had been week 1, first game for a rookie quarterback, first game for a new head coach, sometimes fans can look at that and go, that's a win. That's easy. I don't have to yell as loud. Maybe I won't even go. I think the Niners are going to cut that off at the feet. Right? Lon Duvall says, schedule looks good to me. Seth says, thankfully we aren't facing any powerhouses like the Lions, Ravens, or Eagles. Now, let me shoot over here and just take a quick peek at the Rams schedule. Because they finished in first place. And so they're going to get those 3 other games. I know for a fact they play the Lions. In fact, I made a note here that when we play them in week 16 at home on Thursday Night Football, we're coming off another home game against the Colts right there. The Rams are coming off playing the Lions. I'm pretty sure of it. Rams are coming off playing the Lions. Let me see if it's hit yet. I don't see the Rams schedule yet on ESPN anyway. Let's see here. Nope. If you guys could tell me if that Lions game is road or home. But either way, remember the stat last year? The Lions were that team that was very similar, and I think they've been like this for the last 2 years, very similar to those 12, 13, 14 Seahawks, that the record of teams the week after they played the Lions, not great, because the Lions are so physical and they really, really, really beat you up. X-Wing asks about the Saints potentially trading for Kirk Cousins. I think the fact that they invested a second-round pick in Tyler Shuck and invested 2 draft picks the previous 2 years on young quarterbacks, they have all that cap hell they're trying to dig out of. They have a young coach. I don't know where Cousins ends up now. I thought it was going to be Cleveland, but then they have like 7 quarterbacks now, including a veteran. I think the Falcons might just hold on to him and just make sure that Penix can stay healthy. Seth thinks they'll start Spencer Rattler. We'll see. Nate says 10-11 win season. So I'm going to do my schedule prediction tomorrow. And then that way I'm going to really dig into like who are teams playing the week before us and all of that stuff, right? But just off the top of my head, my initial reaction to this, they won 10 games last season with all sorts of issues on the roster. If they only get 10 wins out of this schedule, I think I'd be disappointed. Why is the Minnesota game not primetime? Darnold revenge game storyline. Maybe he was only there a year. It's not revenge. They didn't do him dirty. I'd have to look at what the primetime games are that weekend elsewhere to determine that. But also, if both those teams come into that and they're flying high, maybe it's flexed. Right? Bob Parmenter says there's a lot of similarities in a broad sense to the 2012 progression we can hope. Yeah, I don't think even in my most optimistic moment, and this is certainly something we'll talk about more throughout the offseason, that I'm going to predict a 14-win season and a 1 seed in a Super Bowl team here. That would require a tremendous amount of projection with a very young roster. I think 2012 is fair with all the young players on this roster and a young quarterback with a high ceiling, but we're waiting to see if he can put 2 back-to-back years together. This could be that year that, hey, by the end of it, we're feeling like we have a championship contender moving forward and maybe going into next offseason with cap space, not a lot of huge free agency question marks, and maybe you can make a big swing on that one player that can put you over the top, and you head into the offseason with fewer question marks. We should know a lot more about the offensive line. I'm on record saying I think it's going to be dramatically improved. We'll know about the quarterback situation, right? We'll get some clarity in some other areas as well. Shane Turner, what's up, Shane? Good morning. Just woke up and tuned in. Shane's in Australia. If you haven't ever seen it before, haven't seen the schedule yet. Just Niners week 1. Hope you're well. Hope you are as well, Shane, and you can get caught up here. Scott says, awesome schedule. I like facing the Niners early. I mean, first and last. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate the donation. And I mean, this is a bottom line. Certainly, Scott chimes in again, says those saying 49ers have an easy schedule. Look at us last year. You still have to play games first. I mean, that's the thing. You can look at the schedule and go, okay. Jags is a win, right? Titans is a win. Falcons is a win. Saints are a win. Colts are a win. You don't know. Like Liam Cohen could be the perfect elixir for Trevor Lawrence. And they got weapons down there galore now, right? And that offense could be flying high. You could say, week 3, New Orleans, that's a win. And most likely, look, I'll give this one away. Probably going to count that as a win when I do my prediction tomorrow. But what if this offense stumbles coming out of the gate? What if it doesn't all just click right off the bat? New scheme, new players, young players, young quarterback, well, young to the team. It might take that unit a while to get rolling. I hope it doesn't, because my goodness, if they come out and look disjointed in week 1, people are going to boo. It's stupid, but they will. So you just can't really look at the schedule. Just on the flip side of that, like I think Tampa Bay could be really good. As I said earlier, I think that roster has as much continuity heading into the offseason as most. And they got talented players in key positions. They added, I like what they did in the draft. But maybe they just don't put it all together. Maybe Baker doesn't play as well this year. Like you just don't know, right? It's what makes it fun. I heard a lot of this today. Like, who cares about, people really care about the schedule? Like, you don't even, well, yeah, they do. My views will show it. People are interested. The NFL is a 365-day a year enterprise. They've done a good job spreading this out and giving us things to get excited about. It really slows down now until maybe mandatory minicamp. But I'll keep finding things to talk about because it's how I make a living. But guess what? Y'all always show up. And there's always someone that wants to watch, listen, talk about it. And so we'll continue to do that. And I'll try to do my best to be as creative and interesting with the subject matter as possible. True Metal Jake puts his money on the line and says, I think we're going 5-2 going into the bye. I mean, that would be huge. That would be tremendous. Probably, there's a good chance that puts you at least in a tie for first heading into the bye. And then coming out of it, yeah, you get the big Sunday night football game, but again, you get rested, you get healthy. If there is a tricky stretch, I said there wasn't a murderer's row, and I stick to that. But coming out of the bye, at Washington, Dan Quinn, Jaden Daniels, home against Arizona, who by week 10, if they really put it all together and that defense starts to play well, they could be really hard to handle. And then having to turn right around and go down to LA, back-to-back divisional games, like coming out of the bye, that'll be an important stretch. Like looking ahead to it from now, if you do have a good record going into the bye, maybe it's even if it's 4-3 and you have designs on being a playoff team and making a real run and maybe even challenging the Rams for the division title, that's going to be a huge stretch right there. So I think that while it's not a murderer's row, it's not as daunting as some of those stretches we've seen in recent years. coming out of the bye to go Commanders and then back-to-back Cardinals, Rams, that could be really tricky. Really, really tricky. Road trips that I'm looking forward to the most, and I'm hoping I'll be able to go to all of the games this year on the road. I have never been to any of these cities except for Los Angeles, of course, and Arizona. Pittsburgh would be cool. Never been there. Weather would be nice. Still in September. Obviously the nation's capital, although I wouldn't have time to probably explore. I'll tell you right off the top, Nashville is a city that intrigues the heck out of me. That would be fun. I might even try to make that one, especially because it's the end of November. Like things start to get pretty dark and gloomy in the Pacific Northwest. I think end of November in Nashville, weather might still be mild, but just to get down there, might maybe make a 2 or 3 day weekend out of that. Maybe have my lady join me on that trip. And then Carolina, week 17, a chance to, again, get some better weather at that time of year than it will be in the Pacific Northwest, but also see my old friend Jeff Rickard, who is the program director at the big sports radio station down there. He was my former mentor in TV. We still stay in touch. He has me on his station and vice versa. I have him on the show anytime these two teams play, and they always seem to find a way to each other. So haven't seen him in person, though, in 30 years. So just for selfish reasons, I look forward to that trip. Let's see. Don't want to miss out on any of you guys. Shane says, let's not get carried away. Remember, some people have the Seahawks at 3 wins with a top 10 pick. This is true. Vegas has the over-under wins at 7.5. A lot of prognosticators have picked the Seahawks to finish last in their division. A lot of newness on offense. I believe it will be good, but maybe not right out of the gate. That's a very pragmatic and reasonable take from you, Shane. Something that's not easy to find online these days. X-Wing asks me, how's life as a full-time content creator? Body starting to recover. The body feels great. I haven't quite parlayed that into getting in great shape again. That was one of my goals during this stretch. But yeah, it's just my former full-time career just beat the crap out of my body. And so that's great. Been able to get out and explore here. I've seen parts of the country in the last few months that I've never seen before in my life. Being born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, I always just very proudly kind of always would pound my chest and, you know, proclaim that I lived in the most beautiful part of the country. And it is during certain times of the year. But I had no idea. I honestly was oblivious to how much freaking beauty there is driving through this country. It's unbelievable. Just lush, green, wooded. My fiance and I just drove to Indiana 2 days ago to go. That's where her mom lives. So 6-hour drive. We drove there, hung out, drove back the next day. Drove through like Dayton, stopped for lunch in Dayton, Ohio. Never been there before. That was a cool city. Driven through Columbus. It's always cool to drive through some of these cities now that you've seen from afar. And it's like, that's where the Buckeyes play. That's the national champions, you know? But also just the tiny little like movie set picturesque old school towns with those old brick lined main streets and things like that. It just things that you just aren't used to seeing in the Pacific Northwest, and everything's so spread out in the Northwest. So to be able to drive and see multiple cities and towns and things like that along the way, it's stressful, especially this time of year. Like you'll notice there haven't been any ad reads, which you probably all love, but that's just because it's the off season and those advertisers don't like to spend money this time of year. And so that means no revenue. So it's a little scary, but again, it's all, you know, kind of building towards goals, and my partner is really, really supportive. So thank you for asking. I appreciate that. Shane says he's finally caught up to the schedule. Down under, hard not to be positive. Certainly more positive than the top 10 picks some are predicting. Yeah, I agree. I can't remember the last schedule that I thought was this balanced. That's just a word I'm going to keep using. There's just a lot of balance. It's tough to look at this schedule and go, oh man, that's like I said, that's week 9, 10, 11 might be the trickiest stretch, but that's not a gauntlet. It's not scary. And if we feel by then like it's scary, then that probably means there's some issues with the roster that we weren't expecting. And that'll be the bigger picture issue and not necessarily, how many wins we're going to collect along the way. I like this from Shane. After traveling a fair bit in the States with a Parks Pass, I can confirm it is a country with amazing beauty, Pacific Northwest. Still my favorite. Dreams, can't wait for opening day. Rick James, hardest working man in Hollywood. 11-6. Then the question is going to be, does 11-6 get you in the playoffs? Now, it most likely does. Seahawks win 10, of course, last year. And, when that happened, we all saw all the stats of how rare it was to win 10 games and not make the playoffs. 11-6 probably gets you in. I don't think it wins the division, though. I think the Rams are going to be 12-13 wins. I do. And so it's just a question of, can we get there? And that's why because I'm not counting the 49ers out. I think it's ridiculous that Vegas and some of these other pickers and analysts just assume the 49ers are going to bounce back because they've been good for so long without really digging into the minutia of some of the issues and question marks on that roster. But I like finding out week one what they're going to look like. And then assuming the Rams are going to be the best team in the division to start the season and will probably get off to a fast start. I like not seeing them until week 11 and 16. All right, let me see now if I can access. Give me a second, you guys. I want to get to look at the other teams' schedules. See if NFL.com has populated them all. Yeah, I think they have. One thing that I think would be interesting to talk about is the just this whole release situation. Somebody made a great suggestion today, and I wish I could remember who it was. I would give them credit. But if the league is going to allow all of these leaks to the point where before they even go on the air with their release show, everything is out there. I mean, imagine if on March Madness, you tune in for selection show and it's already been leaked and all the teams know and the players, those moments of people finding out, of teams finding out, especially those bubble teams, the small teams that haven't been there in a while, and those great reactions, we just wouldn't get those anymore. I know it's not the same when it comes to, professional football players, right? But I just can't find. Okay, here we go. Okay. So this is what the Rams schedule looks like. They open at home against the Texans. That'll be interesting. Then they get 2 quick road games at Tennessee, at Philly, week 3. So right off the bat, that's where winning the division gets you those tougher matchups. So while the Seahawks are playing San Francisco with a new defensive line, the Steelers with a bunch of changes on offense, and a very, very young New Orleans team at home, probably with a rookie quarterback, the Rams face the Texans, albeit at home, and then they go on the road to Tennessee, and then they have to play the Eagles right off the bat. And that's not even a primetime game. That really surprises me. That's a 10 a.m. morning East Coast game for them to play the Eagles. Then they come home and play the Colts and Niners, week 5. That'll be big. Then they travel to the Ravens in week 6. Back-to-back road games, Ravens, Jags, and then they have the same bye as us, week 8. They come out of the bye and play the Saints. Then they're at San Francisco, Seahawks at home, Buccaneers at home, at Panthers, at Cardinals, and then Lions at home before that second Seahawks matchup. And then week 17, they're at Atlanta before finishing up with the Cardinals at home. So my goodness, yeah, you can see why they put that week 16 matchup on Thursday Night Football. That could be an absolute huge one. Let's just take a look at the 49ers schedule. real quick. Sorry, guys. And things that you think are going to be hyperlinked aren't hyperlinked. That's fun. Anyway, we'll do some of that tomorrow. Back to questions, comments. Shane asks, which game is the most intimidating? Thank you for the super thanks, for the super chat. The most intimidating. Maybe that Buccaneers game, week 5, because it's early enough in the season that things might not be totally settled. And I mean, that roster, I just think, let's pull it up, shall we? Like I said, I think there's as much continuity there as most teams. Assuming Chris Godwin's back from injury, the weapons that Baker Mayfield has there, Bucky Irving establishing himself as the full-time guy in the backfield. That offensive line should be solid. And then on defense, I mean, they're so good up front. I really like some of the pieces they added in the draft. They brought Hassan Reddick in. If he can get back to his old ways. Man, they got some dudes that I've liked a lot in the last few drafts. Sorry. Yeah, I think they're going to be a team that could be poised for a fast start on their own. So I'd say probably Tampa right now, just because there's the most known quantity on that team. Even the Houston Texans, we loved what CJ Stroud did as a rookie, but they completely overhauled that offensive line. And so they're going to be starting off, really trying to get some continuity there and build that thing up. So who knows what that's going to look like by the time they get here. And then, Shane, you mentioned the Commanders, but again, if you go look at all the turnover that roster had from the team that did so well last year, Laramie Tunsil in at left tackle should be an upgrade. Sam Cosmi might be back from injury at right guard. Brandon Coleman shifting from guard to tackle this year. He'll be playing right guard or right tackle for the first time. So we don't know what that looks like. A lot of new guys on defense that they brought in either through free agency or the draft. But we'll know by then. Certainly coming out of the bye, I think will be an advantage for the Seahawks. Or if maybe not an advantage in the game, but I'd rather face the Commanders with Jaden Daniels with an extra week for Mike McDonald to prepare and game plan for Jaden Daniels, right? That'll be a fun matchup though, right? Like, imagine if you want to spy Jaden Daniels, how many teams have as many options as the Seahawks? You could put Devin Witherspoon inside. You could put a third linebacker, whoever that might be, right? You could use it, Nick Emenwari, if he's feeling really comfortable by then, as that box safety, but also a guy who can spy. You could bring Kobe Bryant or Julian Love up into the box. Some really cool possibilities for that one. All right, you guys. Let me do this. One second here. Here, I wanted to put this up, but give me a second. This is what the next couple of days looks like. Tomorrow, as promised, full schedule prediction. So I'll dig into this a little bit more, kind of what the other teams look like the week before and that kind of thing. Take a deeper, closer look at some of the rosters. And I will predict a record tomorrow for the Seahawks. I did not do it last year because of all the changes. And then I did it coming out of the Lions game, even though it was a loss last year, because I felt like I knew who that team was and I felt good about where they were headed. And at the time, I was so excited, thinking that all those guys were going to come back on defense, that I picked 12-5 to finish out the season. Obviously came up short, but we'll see what it looks like tomorrow. And then Friday, if you remember Max Toscano from Remember the Tight End Substack, he also writes for SI, covers the Bengals for SI. It was a great episode. Lots of really positive feedback. Max is really great. One of the outstanding young up and coming content creators out there. And he did some research on wide receiver compatibility and how this idea that you have to have a true slot guy and a true X and an outside guy, and that, players like JSN and Cooper Kupp might not be compatible. Throw all that out the window, and he's going to explain to you why they don't have to be perfectly traditionally aligned compatibility wise in order to work in certain schemes. And then Sunday night, we will have a viewer Q&A, because we just haven't done as many lives lately. So we'll just kind of catch up on all the news, things going on around the division, and I'll sort of map out what the next week beyond that will look like with content as well. Until then, follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. Like, subscribe, share the video and the channel. That's the best way to support the channel. But if you want to support me as an independent full-time content creator, you can do so down in the description. I've got all the different methods and links for you to do that. Until next time, sit with this, play with this. Give me your thoughts down in the comments of what you think of this schedule. And tomorrow, tune in for certain for my full record preview. Until then, forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks, you guys.